Breaking news from college football. LSU firing head coach Brian Kelly after 4 seasons, our insider Matt Zenitz confirms. The decision comes after the Tigers got crushed at home by Texas A&M on Saturday. The loss dropped LSU out of the top 25, and that was the final straw for LSU, which entered the season with national championship expectations, but is on track to miss the playoffs in each of Kelly's 4 years in Baton Rouge. Kelly finishes with a 34-14 record at LSU and is owed a massive buyout of $54 million. We're now joined by CBS Sports national college football reporter Brandon Marcello on the heels of this news coming out of the college ranks. And we heard a little bit of rumblings, especially after that loss to Texas A&M, but I want to get your initial reaction to now the news being official.
Yeah, things weren't going to be too well when you see the governor of Louisiana talking about ticket prices after that game. And remember, this is a unique situation at LSU because they're in between school presidents right now. So the governor of the state of Louisiana, because it's a public university, is involved in the decision making when it came down to this with the firing of Brian Kelly. Listen, we're in an era here in college football where everything has to be so immediate. They feel like you have to be a big winner right away to keep pace with everything. And the moment the people there at LSU started to see them slipping a little bit and that they weren't going to be in contention, one for the SEC, let alone a college football playoff berth, they had to make the hard decision to move on from Brian Kelly, because at LSU, things are very, very stringent there when it comes to the expectations. And what's really crazy, if you think about this, the last 2 coaches at LSU, Ed Orgeron and Brian Kelly, both won more than 70% of their games at LSU, and both were fired. That tells you just how high the expectations are there in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, and then also the previous 3 LSU head coaches going on to win national championships within their first 4 seasons. Obviously, that not boding well for Brian Kelly. But what do you think ultimately tipped the balance for LSU leadership to make this move now rather than maybe letting things play out and waiting till season's end?
Well, Brian Kelly's not the most likable person. I think he kind of ruffles some feathers as well, just among the boosting circuit there and also among the athletics administrators. And today they had meetings, Brian Kelly did, with the athletics director discussing potential moves within his own staff about firing their offensive coordinator, Joe Sloan, which was one of the worst kept secrets in college football over the last 3 to 4 days, even before the A&M game. But apparently things got kind of blown up and came kind of head to head there. And it blossomed from there. More people started getting involved. As I said, the governor of the state of Louisiana. And at that point, there was really no coming back. This was something that was on thin ice already, something they were going to look at the end of the year and judge everything. But when you have a head coach that's there saying, hey, and kind of overreacts about a little bit of everything, about his control of the program and not wanting to be messed with, they decided to go ahead and pull the trigger.
Brandon, let's talk about the big headline here, because that buyout for firing Kelly without cause is reported at around $54 million. That is the second largest buyout in college football history. How does such a massive financial stake affect LSU?
Well, I think the good thing for them, it's a massive buyout, but according to his contract, they pay that out between here and to 2031 in equal monthly payments. So they don't owe him a big lump sum, which a lot of these contracts now are like that, where you owe as much as 50% or maybe even all of it within 30 to 60 days and then payments afterward. They're going to be able to kind of spread this out over the next 6 years. Still, that's a lot of money. What will be interesting to see is if there's some negotiations here with the buyout to lessen it a little bit. Also, Brian Kelly's buyout could be mitigated by a future job. So let's say he goes and gets a head coaching job somewhere else here in this coaching cycle. Whatever they pay him at his new job is going to offset that buyout, so that could end up helping LSU. In fact, that's what LSU's betting on, and for that matter, what Penn State was betting on when they let James Franklin go. They're expecting that these will be 2 names that will be in high demand for some of these jobs, because we're expecting a record-breaking coaching carousel with more than 30 openings across the FBS.
Let's build on that just a little bit more, because you say some of these names that are going to be highly looked at for some of these openings. What do you think is next for Brian Kelly?
Well, I think he'll probably take some time to rest and relax on this, but I would expect he's going to put his name in the hat for some of these jobs out there and some of the bigger ones. I mean, I could even hear him come up at Penn State potentially as they get their search going there. There's a lot of programs that you also have to look at that are kind of mid-tier in the power conferences that want to make a splash, right? They're going to be really kind of going after coaches that these other blue blood programs are going to probably take away from them. So you might try and get a retread coach at a place like a Virginia Tech or in Arkansas, guys that have won elsewhere, but maybe they were fired or let go, and you can bring them in and excite your fan base. It's going to be fascinating to watch because James Franklin, Brian Kelly, they're going to have options because right now, to be quite honest, the expectation is we're going to have more jobs open than qualified candidates to take over as head coaches. So this is going to be one of the craziest coaching cycles we have ever seen. And I don't think Brian Kelly or James Franklin, unless they want to sit on the couch, will be sitting on the couch next season. They'll be on the sideline wearing some other colors and teaching some players there to try and win a championship at another program.
Okay, speaking of some of these vacancies, we see them right here. It's a number of openings that are going to happen this offseason. I mean, you mentioned Florida, you mentioned Penn State among some others, but now that we're looking at LSU, which candidates, and I'm talking either internal or external, should maybe LSU look at to replace Kelly? Who or what makes the most sense just given their current roster?
Well, I'll tell you what, Lane Kiffin would obviously be an explosive hire, and they would have to fight Florida for that, but also they have to fight the college football playoff for that because Ole Miss is on the track to make the playoff, and I'm not so certain that Lane Kiffin would want to leave his team potentially while they're making a playoff run. And also, would LSU or Florida want to wait into January potentially when after their early signing period and also potentially after the one transfer portal window that starts January 2nd? That's a very tough ask. But other names I would really consider, but maybe LSU would actually look down on, is an in-state coach. That's Tulane coach John Summerall. He's someone whose name is going to come up in some other searches potentially here later on, especially if the job at Auburn comes open later this year. John Summerall is someone that will be targeted there, I'm told. And then also at Ole Miss, if Lane Kiffin were to leave for Florida, for example, I think John Summerall is someone that could be looked at for Ole Miss. So there's a lot of coaches out there at the group of six level that could get some looks, but jobs like LSU and Florida, they're going to want to make a big splash and go after someone big here. I would be very fascinated to see if athletics director Scott Woodard, who is a guy who wants to make big splashes, every single one of his hires or near hires have been like that. Even back when Jimbo Fisher was at Texas A&M, remember, the reason why Jimbo Fisher got that big contract at Texas A&M the second time was because they were afraid LSU and that athletics director was going to come calling and throw all the money in the world at him. If he is leading this search once again, they're going to throw a lot of money at some big-time candidates and maybe even have a surprise or two up their sleeve.
LSU, one of those schools that maybe will be making a big splash this offseason with this coaching carousel. And nonetheless, Brian Kelly also will probably be making a big splash wherever he does land. Nonetheless, Brandon, we appreciate you being on top of this news. We'll definitely be checking back in as things continue. Taking a look at the LSU's last three national championships. Well, the last one coming in 2019, that was in their head coach's third year of his tenure. Les Miles back in 2007 in his third. I mentioned the stat earlier. Their last three head coaches have all gone on to win national championships within their first 4 seasons. It was year 4, and they're not headed that way. Parting ways now with Brian Kelly. We've got more reaction coming up. Brian Kelly out at LSU. Brian McFadden in to give us his take. That's next. Breaking news coming straight to you from CBS Sports HQ. Brian Kelly out as head coach at LSU after a letdown against Texas A&M on Saturday. Brian Kelly with the second largest buyout contract, $54 million owed to him. But now, Kelly out at LSU. They'll be going on the rest of the season looking for their interim coach, who is the next coach for the Tigers. But as of now, Kelly out, and LSU now on a search for a head coach. We're now joined by CBS Sports NFL analyst, two-time Super Bowl champ Brian McFadden. B-Mac, I want to get your take on this firing, this news that came down. We think about this timeline, and obviously The Tigers getting embarrassed by Texas A&M on Saturday. Now here we sit on Monday. What do you make of the timing of this news?
I felt like when you look at how lopsided the game was against A&M and just how out of place LSU looked in terms of the personnel and the execution, enough is enough. When you talk about the expectations, LSU, their expectations are extremely high. Brian Kelly jumped into a position that was vacated by a coach that won the national championship there at LSU. When you look at the coach before Coach Ed Orgeron and Les Miles, he was let go after having a successful tenure there in winning a national championship as well. So when you go into those said positions where the two previous coaches that you're replacing won national championships, oh, by the way, also won SEC championships, in your 4-year span, Brian Kelly, he has nothing to show for in terms of what those coaches did. Hasn't won an SEC championship, hasn't come close to winning a national championship. He never reached the expectations. So when you look at the nature of college football in totality, currently these blue blood-like football programs, they will not exercise patience if they're not seeing any belief that you have the ability to win championships there. And that is the mindset with LSU, and that's why they felt like now was the time to go ahead and cut ties with Brian Kelly.
I feel like a program that is used to winning, has a history of winning. That leash gets a little bit shorter when you're starting to fall short of those expectations. But now I want to get your take. Do you think Brian Kelly ever fit the culture and expectations of coaching at
No, I never felt like, just being a fan from afar and watching college football my entire life, it feels like, I never felt like Brian Kelly and LSU was a match made in heaven. I think they tried to create that. They tried to establish that. Let's go back to the first intro with Brian Kelly being introduced to LSU. Remember the fake Southern accent that he displayed there in the basketball arena? It was like he was trying too hard to fit in. Be authentic, be yourself. Secondly, coming from Notre Dame, that is a national program. They can recruit anywhere in the country. But you go from Notre Dame down to the SEC. Southern football is different. The way you talk to these players, the way you recruit these prospects, the family, it's a different world. Trust me, I know. I'm a Southerner and I played football in Florida. So when you talk about when I was being recruited by coaches from different places, the relatability wasn't oftentimes felt. And that's why I feel like this could be a disconnect, and they tried to make it work. But when you look at the overall landscape of things, he had issues, in my opinion, in just being able to fit in to that Southeastern Conference culture, which is different than other areas in terms of the country when it comes to college football.
Okay, well, you say that was not quite a match made in heaven. So let's make a match made in heaven. What do you think, who do you think is a good fit for LSU?
Well, listening to Brandon, he made some critical points in terms of LSU and how they go about their business. Anytime there's a head coaching vacancy there with their organization, they're not going to go small. They're not going to do what some other universities have done in the past and may go get a head coach from a group of 5 team, may get a head coach from a smaller conference. They're going to go big fish hunting. Big fish hunting. That's what they're going to do. And I have 3 names. The first name I like to throw out, Joe Brady. The reason why I'm going Joe Brady is because he was a part of a championship-like run there when Joe Burrow was the head coach. He was a part of an outstanding offense. When you look at having the luxury of having Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and how he utilized those players to be able to be put in position to be successful. And he understands the recruiting side of things, too, in the SEC. Currently, he helped Josh Allen accomplish an MVP a year ago. So you talk about a coach that's been successful collegiately and also doing so in the NFL. It makes perfect sense. What about Jimbo Fisher? The common theme with Jimbo Fisher, he was once an LSU coach as well. He was on that staff with Nick Saban when they won the first national championship as the OC. He understands the Southeastern Conference culture. He understands how to recruit in that area. And oh, by the way, you can say whatever you want to say about Jimbo Fisher as a head coach. He's shown the ability to win. Won a national championship at Florida State, went to A&M, kind of turned that program around. Granted, things didn't work extremely well, but he's been successful. And we can't forget, when they read Jimbo up at A&M, one of the main reasons why he got that significant increase in terms of pay was because they felt like LSU was kind of poaching around the neighborhood to see if they can steal Jimbo Fisher away from A&M. So that makes perfect sense. And the last name, when I said big fish hunting, this ain't a fish. This is like a whale. This is like a big whale.
Yeah.
And we heard Brandon say, when you make this move for LSU, you got to be willing to pay top dollar. Nick Saban.
Making a big splash.
Nick Saban, in my opinion, would be the name that, in terms of recruits, in terms of prospects, you instantly drop everything and you hear him out because of his legacy. And I understand he said he is enjoying what he is doing now. It's a great job. But he also said he does not want his wife, Miss Terry, to hear any of these numbers that potential opportunities might throw out. Because when she hears these numbers, she's like, oh, yeah, we got to go get the bag. And she also know, man, you still got it. And you know anything about relationships. Us as men, our homeboys can tell us one thing. Our family members can tell us one thing. But when the old lady tell you something and she like, you better go get that bread, go get the bread. So LSU, in terms of big whale hunting, that is the name I would consider as well, because you got to find a way to bring a guy in that you know will put you in positions to win championships when you make these kind of firings.
And knows about a winning culture. And I think that is extremely important as far as LSU when looking forward. But when we look at the rest of their season, I mean, they are playing the juggernaut that we do call the SEC. They do have upcoming games against Alabama. Yeah. They also have an upcoming game against Oklahoma. But now that we're looking at this team, and we know they have good players on their roster, this is a good team.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like they made the move now, because let's say you stick around and you keep Brian Kelly there and he happens to beat Alabama. Well, you can't fire him now, right? You can't. So they felt like now is the time, but they still can correct their wrongs and find a way to finish on a good note with that Alabama game. You still have Oklahoma as well, who's currently a national ranked team also. So for LSU, man, in terms of the players that are currently there, it's your job to finish the drill. In terms of the coaches that are currently there, you want to show good favor and good graces that whoever the new head coach is, he might be willing to keep me on staff, because they have the resources, they have the NIL money, they have the culture, they have the tradition, they have everything. They're in the South. They got crawfish, they got beignets, they got anything you want in terms of getting the players in the building. They just need to go find the head man in charge that can be the ultimate leader of men 24/7 to be able to get the best on and off the football field.
You talk about they have crawfish, they have a culture of winning. And my question when I asked you about the timing and doing this now rather than waiting until later, we don't see this having any kind of effect on the negative side when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to the portal. No. Because I think we know that they are going after, like you've mentioned, and Brandon Marcello as well, they're going to go after that big fish. That still makes LSU a very appealing place for players.
Yeah, no question. I think when you make this move, first and foremost, when we look at college football, the landscape in terms of in-season firing, you just need one domino to fall. And you know what happens when one domino falls, many will fall behind them. When Penn State fired James Franklin, it made things a little easier for other universities to have to do the same thing when they had reservations about their head coach. Penn State fired James Franklin, and then look what happened. Florida fired Billy Napier, and now look what happened. LSU fired Brian Kelly. So if you're LSU and you've seen exactly what's happening in the world of college football, Penn State will be a coveted job that's available. Florida, who's in the same conference, the SEC, will be a coveted job that's available. You will have a West Coast job in UCLA, Stanford. There are so many quality jobs that are currently available right now, and Brandon also emphasized they could be a lot more available. You don't want to wait, because now when you fire your head coach, you're doing your due diligence. Who could we consider? Who would like to be our head coach? So now you can eliminate the time process of waiting around to the 25th hour to go get that head coach, especially when how important recruiting is. Because now when you talk to these prospects, you got to sell to them and their parents. We got a guy in place who we know you're going to love. Right? You can't go into these households and say, right now, we don't know. We're hoping to go get the best guy. Because me as a recruit or as a parent, I don't want to hear that. I need to know exactly which direction are you going, so I know if I want to get in that car and follow you, if I want to go the opposite direction.
Tigers getting ahead of this early, making their decision with plenty of time before the end of this season and before the coaching carousel continues to spin. But for what it's worth, the portal for players at LSU begins tomorrow, and that lasts for 30 days. Brian McFadden, we appreciate you stopping by with that insight right there. Taking a look at Brian Kelly's career as a head coach. I mean, 36 seasons. His record, 318 wins, 111 losses, 2 ties, but most notably, 34-14 wasn't going to cut it for the Tigers. As they're moving on, Brian Kelly will be finding a new place to call home.
And we continue to follow that breaking news out of college football. LSU has fired head coach Brian Kelly after 4 seasons. That has been confirmed by our insider Matt Zenitz. The decision comes after the Tigers got absolutely crushed at home by Texas A&M Saturday night. The loss dropping LSU out of the top 25. And that was the final straw for the school. LSU entered the season with national championship expectations, but instead they are on track to miss the playoff now in each of Kelly's 4 years in Baton Rouge. He finishes 34-14 at LSU, certainly not meeting those expectations that we all expected. And we welcome you into our CBS Sports HQ studios. Haley Sutton, happy to be joined by a guy who knows a thing or two about playing against LSU, our Alabama running back, Damien Harris. Damien, the writing has kind of been on the wall for a few weeks. I know you talked about this earlier before the firing happened, but now that it's happened, what's your reaction?
One, it's about damn time. And two, I hate to say I told you so, but I mean, I very eloquently, very passionately, with a very spirited and enthusiastic mindset, laid it all out why Brian Kelly is not fit to be the head coach at LSU. It's the record, it's the drought of championships, it's the disconnect between himself, the players in the locker room, and quite frankly, I'm gonna take it somewhere where it needs to go. Ever since I heard that introductory introduction, we'll call it, at the LSU basketball game, and there was the fake Southern accent and
really
just,
bad.
Trying to buy over the fans. It seemed political. It seemed manufactured. It did not seem genuine. And basically what we've seen in his 4 years, it basically backs that thought process up entirely.
I mean, we talked about the record. It's a winning record, but maybe not like the sexy record that you're expecting for LSU. It's interesting, Damien, as well, because if you look at the big picture of Brian Kelly, he's 318, 111, and 2 all time. That's the winningest active head coach in the FBS. Of course, he's no longer active because he's been fired. But either way, what do you think was the biggest mistake, the biggest problem for LSU under Brian Kelly?
Again, I think it goes to the disconnect between him and his players, because with all the talking that we heard from Brian Kelly, with all the things that he said they needed to be better at, we saw Brian Kelly take money out of his own pocket and throw it into the big collective to go out and get more players in the transfer portal. They have 5 stars everywhere in the state of Louisiana, so recruiting isn't a problem. He cannot get his players to deliver and play the way that he says it needs to be done, or just listen to what coaching advice he has, whatever. And unfortunately, I hate to bring this up, but there was a player that got hurt under Brian Kelly's watch who is no longer playing football, and the big narrative around that has been Brian Kelly doesn't care about his players based off of that one incident alone. Now, I'm not going to say names. Everybody who they know, people know. We know the situation I'm talking about. So I can't necessarily say that I'm surprised that his players don't care what he has to say. I'm not necessarily surprised that they're not buying into whatever theatrics or political speeches he gives. They can tell. Players can see right through all of the speeches. We got to do this. This is Louisiana State University. I've had success other places, blah, blah, blah. They can see right through that. If you have a coach in front of you that's not genuine, that does not care about the players, the families, and most importantly, making these the most successful young men that they can be, they see right through that. They don't listen. They don't play to a certain standard, and they just don't do what you need them to do, and that's why Brian Kelly's in the situation that he's in.
Well, and I go back to when he was leaving Notre Dame. Even that process was an odd one as well, how he let the team know. So it's certainly a strange situation to be in for a coach that is so successful from a winning standpoint, but if you're not getting along with your team, then that makes a big difference. Let's talk about LSU going forward here. Obviously, that big loss to Texas A&M, no good, no fun to lose at home. 2-3 start to SEC play, and we laid it out coming into this. This was a national championship aspiration team. Kind of feels like that. It's gone. As you take a look here at the schedule, Damien, the most important thing for LSU, regardless of who is in charge, is what?
Maintaining the locker room, keeping guys out of the transfer portal, keeping guys focused on, yes, this Brian Kelly era might not have gone well, but the track record of Louisiana State University football is tried and true. If you come here, we will make you successful. It might not be with this head coach because he hasn't done a good job of that, but you just have to do something. It's similar to the Penn State situation, right? When Penn State hires a coach, they have to find a guy that brings confidence from the locker room, gets guys to buy in, believe in what he's done, believe in his track record up to that point, and believe that he can take them over the hump. That's what LSU needs. They don't need a guy that's going to come in and be full of speeches. They need a guy that has a plan, that has a proven track record, and that they believe can take them to the promised land, which is clearly what they didn't think Brian Kelly could do.
There's so much money that all of these fired coaches are being paid out. We just saw there, of course.
How many? Hold on. How many millions between just James Franklin and Brian Kelly alone?
Quite
Over
a bit.
100.
Take a look at the numbers here. I forgot about Jimbo Fisher and the $76.8 million buyout that he's dealing with, and he wants to get back into coaching. So looking at about, I'm not very good at math, but like a little over $100 million between Brian and James, and then of course Jimbo Fisher in a class of their own. So Damien, as we're taking a look here at the coaching carousel, we're seeing more and more coaches be fired. We just saw Billy Napier, despite picking up a win at Florida, he is now let go. Any names that jump out to you that could maybe get this LSU program back to where fans expect it to be?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't throw Lane Kiffin out there like everybody else that knows
Very
football,
busy man,
or everybody else that wants to be an analyst or whatever. So let's just throw Lane Kiffin out there for the sake of it. But another name, somebody who hasn't been in coaching, but I guarantee you might still have a little bit of an itch, Urban Meyer. And when you see what he dealt with at Florida, you see the type of personalities, the type of fan base that he had to endure, and some of the things he had to deal with in order to have success. That's what LSU needs. You know what I would even do? I would take a trip to South Bend, and I would just be like, Coach Freeman, Mr. Marcus Freeman, let's just sit down and talk. Are you happy?
Freeman is very interesting.
Are you happy? Are you happy? I mean, listen, I know you get to pick your schedule every year. I know you're independent. I know you don't play in a conference. I know you can afford to drop a game here or there because you're probably going to go 10-0 on the back end, probably make the college football play. But are you happy, Marcus Freeman?
Are you courting Marcus Freeman right now?
I'm just, are you happy? That's all I'm going to say, because, again, when we talk about people with a track record that are tried and true, somebody who's proven that they can do it, somebody who's gone to the national championship with far less talent than what these LSU teams have every single year, he seems like a good candidate. And then again, I go to Urban Meyer, and when you, again, looking at what he did at Florida, again, he had a lot of personalities on that team, a lot of things that he had to manage, which I would imagine would be similar at Louisiana State University, given how rough and rowdy they are. But he's another guy that can handle that environment, somebody that can go in and give the fans something to be confident in, and also lay out a plan, lay out a foundation for the players to also be confident in as well. It's
going to be interesting. Of course, people were trying to get Marcus Freeman to go to the NFL earlier this year, too, so he is a hot commodity. Lane Kiffin's going to have 4 jobs, to your point. All things
right.
We were paying attention to.
Brian Kelly. And hold on. I got to say something, because our very own, CBS's very own, I think he mentioned something about a Nick Saban or a Miss
Bryant,
Terry
McFadden
or something like that. Hey, B-Mac, hey, listen. Wait, where's my camera? He said something about, like, Miss Saban going to say, oh, if the bag is enough, go. He got stock in Ferrari. He got stock in Mercedes-Benz. He already did a stint in LSU and won an SEC and a national championship. He good where he's at. He's good where he's at, Bryant.
The direct quote from B-Mac in regards to Miss Terry, Nick Saban's wife, is, quote, Miss Terry wants to go get the bread.
Nah. They got plenty of bread, believe
Okay.
me.
We'll leave it there. Brian Kelly no longer the head coach of LSU. Plenty more to follow with this story. What's next for the Tigers and who will be taking over? Make sure you lock in to our college football YouTube page. Scan that QR code screen to get the latest right now.